it here in 3, 2, 1. Boom, right into it. We are live. Dean Thomas, you're looking sharp as always. You're looking sharper these days. How are you?
Well, I'm just trying to stay young. I feel your age.
Oh, really?
So yeah, that's
Thank you. You've had a lot going on so far. So first of all, congratulations. You're just putting in the work, and looked like you've spoke everything into fruition this year. So first off, congratulations. Obviously, I'm a fan of yours and your work, but your continued success truly is an inspiration. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, man. You're right. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but yeah, like I'm a big believer in speaking your truth into existence and just being confident in that, and then you just making things happen for yourself. So yeah, I did.
You did do
I'm
it.
doing it. Yeah, I'm doing it.
I was so upset. A little backstory that I couldn't meet up with you in Jacksonville. That was my first UFC event I covered, and it was an amazing event. The first live event, obviously with an audience since the pandemic happened, and now it's just been forward ever since. Let me ask you this. Let's just start off. As far as these events go, has anything surprised you that it's like no one skipped a beat? As soon as people were allowed back in the building, they're louder than ever. Has that been a really cool thing to see? Were you surprised, or you just kind of expected that from UFC fans?
I expected that from UFC fans. I didn't. The only thing that really surprised me was how much we missed the fans. Because that kind of surprised me, because I didn't really when the fans weren't there. I was kind of like, yeah, man, this is even better. But from a spectator's perspective, we really did miss the fans. So it did change things, and how much different the fights are with the fans. Even from the fighter's perspective, they just fight differently with the fans. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think that they probably fight more responsibly without fans, but with the fans, you could see, even in Jacksonville, that very first fight with Carnelossi and her opponent, they just were really responding to what the fans were giving them. And that wouldn't have happened in the Apex.
Right.
They would have fought differently in the Apex. So the fans really have an impact on the fight, and it showed.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But now we'll get into the Jake Paul, because I was really just astonished with that. Like, we have amazing fights going on, but this man walks in the building and everyone's just chanting F Jake Paul. And it'd be randomly. Like, it wouldn't just be one moment. It'd just be randomly throughout the whole night. Like, it just never left their mind. But I know this is a past event, but I never got to ask you this. What are the chances? Like, a lot of people that are just tuning into the UFC may not know this, and I pointed it out on Twitter. What are the chances? So Anderson Silva breaks his shin on Chris Weidman, and now Chris Weidman breaks his shin. It's the same guy in both different instances. What were the chances of that? And what do you expect from him going forward and bouncing back?
Well, again, so we talked about calling things into existence. That's just, kind of divine intervention, like the way the universe works is that, somehow, and I don't believe in coincidence. I think things are just destined to be for whatever reason, and so that incident happened 3 times in the UFC. Chris Weidman was in attendance to 2 of them, or had something to do with 2 of them. Me personally, I was in attendance to 2 of them. That one and the prior one in Minnesota with he passed away, Corey Hill. I was there for that. So I was there for 2 of the 3. So for me, I'm kind of that's kind of weird too.
Yeah. So, maybe you're like the curse. You're the curse, Dean.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to insert trying to somehow insert myself into into the equation. But yeah. But really, Chris Weidman is, he's, I don't know, it's very coincidental that he took part in 2 of the 3. And yeah, well, for whatever reason, that's the way the universe works. It was written for that. Who knows why? We don't know why yet, but we'll figure that out when it happens.
Right. Now, let's kind of fast forward in time as far as current events. UFC 263 just happened. I think Israel Adesanya, obviously, is a global star, especially for the UFC. Put on a spectacular performance, and he calls out Robert Whittaker for the rematch. Let's just say, hypothetically, he beats Robert Whittaker, which is a challenge of itself. What do you expect from him? Because I feel like he's in this unique position where he has beaten pretty much everyone in the weight class. So does he double lap? Does he just beat everyone twice? Or because he did try moving up and it didn't work, but I think he obviously learned from that experience. What do you do if you're Israel Adesanya? What do you do? What do you recommend for him as a coach? What direction should he go in?
I mean, I think he does, the Amanda Nunes route, just I think he obviously stays at 185 and just laps everybody if he can, because that will really totally secure his position in that division. But at the same time, if he's confident, if he believes that the breathing and he's learned so much from that loss, I think he could go back up. Because that fight, despite what we think about the fight with Jan Blachowicz, I actually thought Israel might have won that fight.
Really?
He lost those 2 rounds, 4th and 5th round conventionally because he got taken down. But the first 3, he didn't get taken down, and he might have he won the first round easily. The second round I thought he won. The third round was pretty close. But I mean, I probably could have made a case that he won the third round,
Right.
So I didn't think he didn't get shut out at 205. Now, depending on how he feels about how he did at 205 will kind of determine what route he takes. I think he could go back up and get another crack at it. I think he could, if he answers, because I don't think the weight was the deciding factor. I think,
Right.
his lack of ground game was the deciding factor. But
Right.
he may have worked that out. He may have worked that out. So I think he could go back up and fight Jan Blachowicz. If he could just keep that fight on the feet a little longer, he wins 3 of the 5 rounds.
Right. Right. And I think he showcased his improvement this last fight. Obviously, it was a dominant performance, but you saw when he did get taken down, he seemed comfortable. He seemed like he knew what he had to do. Like I've been here, I've worked on this, and he got right back up. And a lot of times, he switched it over and he got on top in transition. So I just felt like we've seen incremental improvements in his game. Like those type of moments to me show so much because he learned from his loss.
He did. He learned from the loss, but I think the deciding factor in this fight too was not only just his ability to get back up, but the adjustments that he made on the feet that he didn't do against Jan Blachowicz. He allowed Jan Blachowicz's power to really dictate that fight. So he was a little apprehensive at times in that fight and didn't get his hands on Jan enough in terms of he did touch him enough, but he wasn't as slick as he was against Marvin. Against Marvin, he was incredibly slick. His movement was just, next level. It was Matrix-like. He was all, but he didn't do that against Jan. Against Jan, he kind of was frozen a little bit. So
Right.
I think that, so I think he learned a lot from that fight and learned about and gave him a little bit more confidence. Again, I think he could go back up to 205 and still have some success. I really do believe that.
Right. I want to transition to Nate Diaz. I said he has the pay-per-view draw of the superstar, but I don't think he's had now this. I'm not trying to tear him down, but I don't think he's had the resume recently, especially in recent memory, of a superstar. He needs to get some wins in the column. And before I go at Nate Diaz, I got to give Leon Edwards his flowers. He had a great performance. I'm not taking away from Leon Edwards. But what do you make of Nate Diaz? What do you do with him now? Because even after this fight, his stock still rose. People are still interested in him. Does he fight like a Masvidal for a rematch? Do you worry about him getting wins? If you're Dana White or if you're Nate, what do you look for? Because you do have still the draw of a superstar.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to negotiations and the power that they have in the room. If it's if Nate Diaz is a problem for them to negotiate with, it's all right, you know what? Let's not give him any more power by giving him the opponents that he wants. Let's make sure that he's, if he wants to win these fights, he has to earn it. So winning against Leon Edwards was and also Masvidal, that was you got to earn this. Because sometimes when you give these guys a little bit too much power, they're they turn into monsters,
Yeah.
And do we need that many Conor McGregors in this world?
No, that's the thing.
So
if you Connors.
Yeah, so you gotta make him earn that. But if Nate Diaz is not difficult to deal with in the negotiation room, then I say, yeah, you throw him a bone at this point. At this point, you throw him a bone. You give him the opponent that he wants. You give him somebody that's gonna, that's not as slick. Somebody who's doesn't have as great movement. Maybe another, some guy who's just a tough, crazy dude that's gonna brawl with him and give us the fight that we want with Nate Diaz that he can win. But other than that, like, they're making him earn it. If he wants that win, he's got to earn it. But I think he's due a bone. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a guy who is a fan favorite, and he's due a bone. Like, he could use a win right now.
I would love to see him fight like a Robbie Lawler or a Mike Perry.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of what he deserves at this point. But again, like, if he gets that win and then just turns into a monster, it's like, man, we gave you a bone and now you're going to turn into a monster on us. Like, that's, again, like, they're not doing him a disservice by giving him the toughest guys. They're just making him earn it.
Right. What do you make of his brother? Because I've said I think his brother's actually better. All due respect to Nate, I think his brother has the better MMA history, the better MMA resume, but he doesn't have, obviously, the win over Conor. He doesn't have that star power like Nate to that extreme right now. What do you make of Nick? Him returning, him and looking like he's in great shape. They're always in great shape, but he just looks sharp. Is there anyone in particular you would like to see Nick fight?
No one in particular. I mean, but I do think like a rematch with Robbie would be interesting and be a good, like, welcome back fight for him, you know? So, but everyone knows, like, if you've been like, most guys, most fans in the sport today probably don't know the history a lot, and they don't realize that up until that Conor fight, Nate was just Nick's younger brother.
Right.
So, but who they are has never changed in our eyes. Like, the perception of them have changed. Now Nick is Nate's older brother.
Yeah.
But before that Conor fight, Nate was Nick's younger brother.
Yeah.
But they're still the same. Nick has always been better, in my opinion. It's just, again, he didn't have the high profile fight.
Right. Absolutely. I want to get into this Mayweather, Logan Paul. So before we even get to the Paul brothers, I want to ask you this, because that's really the main last thing I want to touch on with you is Conor Dustin. I believe you called when on my show, you said you believed Dustin Poirier was going to win the rematch. And obviously you were right. The rubber match. How do you see this going? What adjustments that obviously Conor had a very boxing stance or oriented approach to that fight, which made his leg very susceptible to leg kicks. So what adjustments do you think Conor makes? What can he make? Because if I'm Conor, I'm a little worried if I'm his coach, because he clipped Dustin right on the chin, clean as can be, but it looks like that weight class made a huge of a difference for Dustin to be able to eat those shots a little bit better than he did at 145. How do you see the rubber match going?
The thing is with that rubber match is, so everybody talks about the adjustments that Conor can make. Okay, so Conor's going to change his stance or change the way, maybe not such a boxing approach. That could very well happen. That could change, right? So let's say he does that. However, the reality is this. Dustin didn't go into that fight thinking, okay, I'm going to chop down his leg. Dustin made that adjustment on the spot. To say, these leg kicks are working. He made that adjustment on the spot and was good enough to be able to work that. So, in my opinion, and Conor wasn't good enough to make an adjustment when he started getting kicked in the legs. In my opinion, Dustin is the more free fighter right now, the more free-thinking fighter, and can make those adjustments on the spot. I think he's, Conor might have, they're very different fighters. Conor has that, that mystique about him, and he's really, really dangerous in one shot. Like, he really can change the fight in one shot. But Dustin is a dog. He's a dog. And you allow Dustin the freedom to say, all right, let's fight, and I can make these in-game decisions on the spot like this. I think Dustin still wins the rubber match.
Wow.
Because I think regardless of the adjustments that Conor makes, I think Dustin is not only going to train the way Dustin trains, but I think he's also good enough to go, oh, you made an adjustment? Guess who's also going to make an adjustment? I can make an adjustment too. So I see that happening. And the reality is that whatever Dustin's game plan going into the first fight was, he didn't get to use that.
Yeah.
He didn't even get to use that, and it's still going to be with him because he trained it for so long. So And then also the reason why I think Dustin is going to win is just because, Conor was the richest athlete in the world this year. Like he made the most. He was on the Forbes list, and he saw his name ahead of LeBron James,
Yep.
Ronaldo, Messi. All these superstars. There's no way. I just can't see being able to look at your name on that list and then being a dog like you used to when you were broke.
Right.
There's something about that. There's something about that, like having that dog in you, that desire, that hunger. And I just don't see that when you're that rich. It's just
the only person we've seen still maintain that is Floyd. It's like, even though no matter how rich he got, no matter how undefeated his record just kept improving, he still found a way to always remain focused and train hard. And I think that's a credit to Floyd that we don't give him enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No doubt about that. But you know what? But there was also and these are just rumors and speculation, but there was also rumors and speculation that Floyd always had money problems because he had gambling problems. So he always needed money. He always needed money. So with Conor is Conor's still coming up. And who knows? I don't know if Conor has money problems and gambling problems. It doesn't seem like it. He seems like he's, so.
That's a great point.
So you just never know. I mean, I guess we'll find out. I'm not saying it's impossible for Conor to still have that dog in him, but it's for me, it's hard to believe.
Right. No. And I think that's a fair criticism. I just think the only thing my rebuttal to that would be, I think for the first time in a very long time, he's had really something to prove. And it's like, okay, now not only did you lose, not only did you get embarrassed, people think you're going to lose this one now. I don't know. I haven't seen the Vegas odds, but I just feel like from a competitor standpoint, you think that would at least ignite a little bit of the old fire that maybe he once had. And I think that's why a lot of people are betting on him to win the trilogy. But to your point, Dustin's adjustments were on the fly. And I think that's a very interesting point that you mentioned, because now it doesn't matter what you can throw at him. He knows how to adjust in the actual game.
Yeah, Dustin's a gamer.
Yeah.
He's an absolute gamer. He's an absolute dog. And he's still around the same people that he's always been with. And he's still living the same humble life that he's always had. I mean, obviously he's made his bag. He's made some money, but you couldn't tell by looking at him. Conor's a different case. You can tell with Conor, he's I don't want to say he's changed, but maybe he has a little bit. Maybe, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. You are allowed to enjoy your life. He can enjoy his life, but just know that with that enjoyment comes, I can't remember if Larry Holmes or somebody said it's hard to do road. What's that?
Marvin Hagler. It's hard to train when you're sleeping in silk sheets to get up.
It's hard to, Hagler. So it's true.
Lost you there for a second. There you go. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry about that. I don't know what the connection, but yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a very point. Let me ask you this. So the last two things I want to ask you, your thoughts on Mayweather versus Logan Paul. Obviously, Logan Paul's 35 pounds heavier. He's age 26. He actually does train seriously. I get it. He's a YouTuber, but I think we label that and don't give him credit for actually putting in the work, for being that much bigger. And for someone like Floyd, I get it. Arguably the greatest boxer of all time, certainly the greatest defensive boxer of all time. But the fact that he was able to get in there, 44 years old, fight someone that's 35 pounds heavier, I think that's a risk a lot of people would not take, and he did it. What were your thoughts on that event? Do you think it's a loss that he didn't knock him out like some people are saying?
I do believe it's a loss. It's not really a loss. It's an embarrassment to pro combat sports. Larry, let's say this. All right, dude, Logan Paul, I definitely want to give him his credit. I want to give the Paul brothers their credit. A lot of people don't like to give them credit because they don't want to. They don't want to admit that, as YouTubers, these kids can fight, that they can fight. And I'm going to say they can fight. Like Jake Paul can fight. Logan Paul can fight. It's the same thing when Conor first came out. When Conor first came out, no fighter wanted to give him credit. Everybody was like, I can't wait to fight him. I want to fight him. From Diego Brandao to, everybody else. They all wanted to fight him until they learned the hard way that he can actually really fight. So, and that's how Dustin learned. Dustin learned the hard way that he could really fight. Yep. So it's the same thing with the Paul brothers, that they can really fight. Just because they did a bunch of YouTube stuff, like that was their hobby. That was their, that's how they got big. But they can fight. So we got to give them their props. But they're not like true professionals. So what I think, it's an embarrassment when you take someone who's not a true professional can get in the ring with who we consider the greatest of all time and go 8 rounds, regardless of the weight. I used to spar guys bigger and heavier than me too, and I used to put them down. And I think Floyd could have put him down. I think Floyd didn't want to put him down. I think Floyd wanted to have fun and just carry him and just play the game. But I think that does our sport a disservice, combat sports a disservice. And here's why. We talk about, we want to make the money that NFL players make. We want to make the money that NBA players make. Do you think I could go into an NBA game and play with them?
No.
No, I couldn't.
Right.
I couldn't. Do you? Most college kids couldn't go into an NBA game and play with them. And they've been playing their whole life to get to that point. But you take a YouTuber against the greatest boxer of all time, and he goes 8 rounds.
Yeah. No, that is a tremendous breakdown that you just did. That is a great point. And it's not like
that's why they pay me the big bucks, Max.
Yeah, that's why they pay you the big bucks, Dean. And see, listen, you didn't even just say just any boxer. It's not like he's playing one-on-one to any NBA player. It's like going and playing LeBron one-on-one. It's going and playing Floyd one-on-one. You're talking about the best in the sport.
Right. Like if I went and played LeBron James one-on-one, you know how bad that would look? I wouldn't. First off, like he would be like, all right, you can have the ball first. I would have the ball for about 3 seconds till he took it from me, and I would never touch it again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
He beat me 100-0 in less than 2 minutes.
Right. And you don't touch the ball. That is a tremendous analogy. Now, let me transition to this. This is the biggest question I've been waiting to ask you. You've coached Tyron Woodley. You've worked very closely with the former welterweight champion, Tyron Woodley. So give my audience a background, an in-depth perspective on what we should expect him to do versus Jake Paul. What is going to happen?
Well, so I'll say this. I had it. When me and Tyron are in camp, we're the best of friends. But when we're not, but when the fight's over, it's like, all right, he goes on with his life, I go on with mine. So like, I hadn't talked to him up until like a week ago, since his last fight. So he had done all this Jake Paul stuff, and I knew nothing about it. I hadn't talked to him until last week. So like I didn't know what was going on. But it kind of concerned me a little bit because he's obviously making a lot of money. And for me, and I know that Jake Paul is dangerous. I don't know how good he is, but I know he's dangerous. He's obviously got some power. He's obviously a decent athlete. And he's obviously been overlooked by fighters. So that makes him dangerous. So like Tyron can't just go out there and be like, man, he's a YouTuber. I'm just going to go out there and bust him up. He's got to take him serious. So if Tyron takes him seriously, and trains like a professional and fights this fight the way I know he can and should, he should bust Jake Paul up. He should bust him up. Absolutely. And the reason why Jake Paul and them are taking this fight is based on Tyron's last 4 performances. He hasn't thrown a lot of punches. He hasn't looked good. And they're thinking they're fighting another wrestler who just looks for one big shot. And if that's what they think, they're wrong. If Tyron goes out there and uses his boxing ability that I know he has and takes him seriously, I'm not going to curse on your thing, but he's going to Jake Paul up.
Mm-hmm. You could have cursed. It would have been okay.
Well, I try to watch my tone around kids.
Right. Come on, man. No, I get that. And because I think the biggest, just to play devil's advocate, would say, he's in his 40s. He's never boxed before. He hasn't won a UFC fight in a while. So I think that Jake Paul can't maybe taking him seriously, but they're thinking, okay, this guy's past his prime. He was a good athlete, like you said, wrestler, not really a striker. And I think by watching what Tyron Woodley has said, watching some of his interviews, and something I've been really wanting, I would love to interview Tyron Woodley and ask him, his approach seems like he's not approaching Jake as a YouTuber. He's approaching Jake as a boxer. And to your point, I think that's what's going to let him win.
Yeah, he has to. He can't approach him as like a YouTuber. Because Jake Paul can box. Like I've watched him box. Like you watch him throw hands. Like, and he's young. He's aggressive. He's strong. He's probably juiced up. You know what I'm saying? Like there's probably, all kind of things, to make him. And he's been slept on. Like he's probably been boxing for a while, and been slept on. He just. I mean, he's from Cleveland. He's like from Ohio somewhere. Like Ohio is a blue collar state, and
Right.
these kids out there don't care, man. Like he's a roughneck. Just because he was on a Nickelodeon show, goofing off doesn't make him any different. Like he's a
Right.
roughneck. He got kicked off the show, didn't he? So
Yeah. No, yeah, he's tough. He is tough, and I've given him his credit and how he's been able to market himself. To your point, I think a lot of people don't want to give them their credit, but you do have to give them their credit on how they've been able to brand themselves, embrace that villain role. And at the end of the day, we're going to tune in whether you want to see him win or lose.
yeah, for sure. And so again, like you can't underestimate him. That's the thing is, whoever underestimates their opponent the most of the two will lose. If Jake Paul underestimates Tyron, he's gonna get effed up. If Tyron underestimates Jake, he's gonna lose. Like this is the way it is. So they can't underestimate each other. But if they both take it seriously, Tyron is just, he's a different level of athlete than anybody that Jake has faced, and probably anybody that he's sparred.
Right.
And
Right.
Tyron hits hard. He's fast. And he's just boxing. It's not MMA where he has to alter his stance or looking for takedowns and looking for kicks. He could just stand there and box, and it's ultimately what he's always wanted to do his entire career. Like that was the only thing that was easy to get him to do in training camp,
Yeah, I'm about to say, is that now? I guess I have to ask: is there any adjustments or things that he truly, like an MMA fighter, truly has to make? Because obviously it's a different sport. I think some people forget, even though they're both combat sports, they're completely different sports. As far as maybe the conditioning or the cardio, I don't know if it's going to be 8 3-minute rounds or not. But is there anything he needs to be careful or look out for when making that transition that you would recommend as a coach?
No, not really. Only because like he's always, even training for MMA, he trained like a boxer. Like he trained with boxing people in boxing gyms and did it like a boxer, which is why I think his MMA striking wasn't that evolved. Because he trained as if he was going into a boxing match.
Right.
So then when he trained for that and then he'd get into like MMA fights, the distance was different. It's not what he was used to. So then he would just, that's why we saw him hesitating, because he was used to like a boxing distance and boxing, ranges. And then when he got in MMA fights, he's now, guys are kicking at him and standing farther away from him. And then now he's like, uh-oh, this is different. And then we didn't get to see his striking fully materialize.
Right. Dean, I appreciate you. Now that you're making Conor McGregor money, whenever you have time, let me know. I would love to come up and drive to you and chop it up with you sometime in person. I appreciate you coming on my show. So for anyone listening, where can they find you and your continued success?
All my social media stuff is the same, at Dean Thomas. So, and Dean spelled D-I-N Thomas. The UFC has put me to work a lot, so you could catch me on the desk, the pre-show, post-shows, the weigh-in shows for pay-per-views, and then you can hear me on the pay-per-views with Anik will throw it to me every couple of fights, and I'll break down some action for you. So, and also the Dean Diaries.
You're like Apollo Creed now. When I have to introduce you on my podcast, I have to be like, okay, he's on Looking for a Fight with Dana White. He's a former UFC fighter. He's a coach as well. Now he's a UFC commentator. Aren't you a comedian? Like you have so many different titles now. I don't really know what to call you.
An avid candle maker. So if I'm about to go on Etsy and start a business, man, and sell my candles.
Look at this, Dean. Well, listen, I'm just appreciative I could be a part of your whole journey. So thank you, Dean, and we'll talk soon.